My paranormal experiences are about ghosts and or demons, which I feel they're both the same thing, which I think are demons. My name is Dawn, and I'm from a small town in Oklahoma. We're out in the county area, so it's rural with woods, lake, streams, and creeks. The stories I'm going to tell you today are mostly about whenever I was a private school teacher and or principal, because I was both, but separately and together. We were in an old church building, and is in the middle of town, or on the outskirts of town. We use the curriculum we use were called. Well, I won't give out what they were called, but the children they would write inside the books and then turn them in. So sometimes kids would transfer from daily school to homeschool and vice versa and back. So this first student, and I'm not going to name any students' names, but they were there every day. So he was getting ready to transfer to homeschool, and he had a whole stack full of paces that ranged from math, English, social science, word building, which is spelling if you go to a public school. And he was in like the middle school age limit, so they didn't have any extra curriculum really. Anyway, they were all piled up, and the rest of his siblings were there, and we were going to give them to him the next day. Well, we go to school, and they're all missing. So we didn't know where they were or anything. And our school was there Monday through Thursday. We always had Friday off because the work they did, it excelled faster than a public school to where they could learn way more in a single week than a public school could, like in a month or so. It was just how it was geared and everything. So we always took a Friday off. And that was usually allowed by our contract with the school that we were with. The way our building was designed is we had the old church auditorium. We had a wing facing, it was kind of like a big L shape. And my classroom, I think I was a principal at this time because the teacher was there and she noticed the paces were missing. So we started a hunt. We could not find them. I didn't start recording the ghostly hauntings until 2004, but we had stuff happen before then. I just don't remember what was all going on. They appeared back over, we did a search and they were not in the building. So they came back over the weekend, and on Sunday evenings, the church youth group would use that building to do their youth group stuff. And we know they didn't have anything to do with it. So we found that very weird. Now, years before this, when my oldest nephew was born, he had experiences and he called this ghost Sally. And we always made a point, anytime we had a student that was new, never to say anything to the next new student about any kind of ghostly activities, because two reasons: we didn't want parents to get upset, and most parents didn't even talk to us about it, so I assume parents didn't care, they thought it was imagination. And two, we didn't want the new student to feed off of what the first student was telling them and say, hey, yeah, I heard this too, kind of like to get out of schoolwork, or you know how kids are. So this building, the auditorium part, is well over 100 years old. The other ones are built 10 years apart, the other wings. And I sometimes worked in the secretary office by myself, and I would always hear noises like something was moving around in there, creaking floorboards. So it was heavy, like somebody was walking. And I was always at the other end of the building when the kids were in the other end, because I was in the secretary office, and I'd always go check because the bathrooms were down the hall from my office. I had two offices, my secretary office and the principal office. So the principal office is near the classroom because it's all open. There's no doors or anything like that. And so I heard somebody walking, and I thought, well, maybe it's one of the students, because I had to get onto one of them for something that they did. And so I thought they were, I thought up, and I got up to look, and there was nobody there. In the boys' bathroom, I heard a noise like the door unlocking and opening. So I hurried back to the secretary's office, and the door is right there. And after a while, I didn't hear no one coming down the hall. So I got up and I go down there, and it's all empty. So that really spooked me, because they would have to pass my office to get to the bathroom. And then the kids had tests and everything. There's a proper order, and one of the teachers had placed they had a break, and they all left the room. when they came back, what the test was missing. So we did a whole search of the whole building and we couldn't even find it. And so to this day, it's still missing. So we had to use a copy of his self-test, his practice test, so he could take the test and pass it. We are in Indian Territory, the Cherokee Nation. So a lot of kids, the one student of mine saw something that looked like an Indian woman with black long hair and looking up toward where the pulpit was in the auditorium. And the student said that there was a red headband going around her head. And that really freaked her out. She was in there because she was sick or something or had a headache, and I let her go lay down on one of the pews so she could get some rest and stuff. And I did have my students write, the ones that could write really well, I did have them write down their own experiences. So some of them were handwritten. And I always told them to tell me in private so the other students didn't get, worked up and everything like that. So I just said, ask the teacher to come talk to me if something happened, because sometimes things would happen inside the classroom during school. So I'm going to do a little backstory. When I was working as just a secretary before I became into the school, especially during the summer, I was working on a word processor that tells you how old this event happened, because we didn't have computers yet. Anyway, the word processor had a keyboard with the lid, and the screen was a monitor, and the monitor faced the hallway. I mean, the monitor reflection could face the hallway. Like I could see somebody coming up behind me. Well, I was alone in the building. One day I was typing up something, probably with church business or something. I saw a good-sized glowing orb go past the door, and I would say if I was standing up, it'd be about waist high. And I was so afraid that it took me several minutes to get up, lock, and shut the door because I didn't want to get up immediately, Another time I would sit at the desk counter, which is closer to the door, because this was a small room, and I would hear kids say, the thoughts were kind of like in my head that kids were saying, come out and play with us. And they'd laugh and giggle. I would shut the door, and I would hear this several times on different days for several weeks. And then one time I had the door shut. I started shutting the door, and the door is wooden, so it's not, carpeted. And the floor had a haze on it, like it was a film going over, and I kept blinking my eyes thinking something was in my eyes. This haze was getting closer. And so I said a silent prayer saying, God, let them be gone, or something to that effect, and then it disappeared. And then besides the footsteps, nobody was around. I would hear music playing in the auditorium. But and it still bothers me. So I apologize in advance if I get a little emotional. But my mom was babysitting one of our church kids. He's probably like around at this time, maybe 4 years old, maybe. And she had to go run to the local store, which is just across the highway. So she had me to watch him. So we went into the nursery area, and he was playing with toys. And I usually helped her watch the kids after school anyway, so I'm used to that. And so he was a very, very smart little boy. He might have been 2 or 3. He was anywhere between 2 and 4. So anyway, we're and the nursery at this point was across from the preschool room. Because at this time, we were still inside the church as a church, so we still had nursery stuff and all that. We sat on the floor, and I was near the door to protect him in case somebody walked in. I didn't want him to run down the hall and meet a stranger. Sometimes strangers came in. And so he would look up, smile, and wave to something across the hall in the other room, because all those doors were open. It didn't bother me at first, but he kept on doing it. So I finally asked him, who was he waving at? And he said, the black people. I turned and looked, and there was nobody there. And I thought, well, maybe he has an imaginary friend. And so he started laughing, and I kept asking him questions. And the results were that there were 3 black people dressed in jeans, overalls, and they wanted him to go play. And that really bothered me. So I got up and shut the door. And when my mom came, I told her what happened. And she went ahead and told the mother when she picked him up, and they wanted to know if he had ever seen one of those types of people, and she said no. But years later, another student came in, and he said, because this little child who I won't name, he started going to public school. So I had a student that was friends with him in a classroom, and he described it into more detail that the Black people weren't really Black. I think they were coal miners, because we do have coal mines around. We used to have coal mines around here, and they were wearing miners' hats. And he said this really freaks me out. They were peeling the wallpaper off of the wall in strips. But the weird thing is we've never had it wallpapered. It's always been painted. So I'm not sure what that was about. Anyway, he said that really freaked him out. And so this little boy, when he was older, told this story to this other guy, to this other kid. And this kid, when he came to our school, he already came here knowing that it was already haunted, but I didn't know that until after the fact. And so that really spooked me, because the backstory of this is that back in the 1980s, during youth group, a teenager, we had a lock-in, and one of the teenagers had invited somebody who practiced witchcraft, and she did a seance in that same end of the hallway. And so that's why we think that particular area is more haunted. And there might be other reasons, like Indian burial ground. We just never know, because this territory has been here for, as Cherokee Nation, for a very long time. So when he mentioned that, that the fingernails and all that, and the coal mining dust, and that just really brought it to home. So sometime during the late 90s, I know I'm doing a little bit backward. I would go over after school was over, go home and eat dinner and finish up my work, and I'd be by myself till late at night. I would always hear footsteps, heavy footsteps. So one time I just got upset, and I used my cell phone, and I called my mother, and because the house was across the street. I said, "Is there a car parked over there?" Because I thought maybe somebody walked in. But see, the hallway, the shadow, you could see the shadow of somebody walking, but they would always stop right before the end of the wall. And she would say no. So I said, okay, I'm done with this. I'm just going to gather up my stuff and go to the house and finish it, because there were some things I could do over there. And I told myself from now on, no more in the dark, because it was dark outside. So I had my two nephews and my niece that attended school from preschool all the way to 12th grade. Sometimes if a child had to go use the restroom, we let them go by themselves. But if they didn't come back a certain time, I would go check on them, because there was an exit door, and some of them had tried to attempt to, get out of the building and escape. And by law, we can't lock the door. My oldest nephew, he's slightly autistic. And so one day he didn't come back from the bathroom. So I went down to check on him, and he was in a classroom hiding under a table. And I said his name, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm hiding from her." And he was shaking visibly. And of course, me being blood related, that bothered me even more. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "She's right there. She's staring at me." And he started to cry a little bit. So I said, "Okay, we'll come out from the table. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." I said, "If anything happens, it'll be me that it happens to. I can't control a demon by any means, but, I needed to comfort him." So he wouldn't hardly walk down the hall, because he said she was right there, and she scared him coming out of the bathroom, and he just ran and hid under the table in, I think, the nursery or another classroom or something. So he called the ghost Sally again. Sally went, he made a noise like she went, "Ah," trying to scare him with these big eyes and everything. And so I just said, "Okay, well, we'll just go back to class, and she probably won't follow us in there." The preschool room at this next story was right next to the girls' or the women's bathroom. And there was an adjacent door, because it used to be the nursery, that way, if they needed to take a kid to go potty, they didn't have to go all the way around the hallway. They could just go right through. The preschool teacher would always sit in the room or play the piano. And if she sat in the room, she usually would read a book. So I get to school, and I had to use the restroom. So I passed, and I heard Michelle playing on the piano, and I saw her playing on the piano. But when I passed her door, she was sitting in a chair reading a book, and she glanced up at me and looked at me so evilly. And I'm still not awake, because I am not a morning person. So it takes me about a good hour to wake up. mentally when I get up. And I kept thinking, okay, so I'm in the bathroom and I'm washing my hands, and I got to thinking, all this time I still heard the piano playing. And I realized what I'd seen was either a doppelganger demon of her or something, because that sent chills down my spine. So I made it a point when I walked past the door not to look in there, because I did not want to see anything that might have changed, for the better or worse. I didn't want to see it gone, because that would have. So anyway, I go down to the auditorium because we were having chapel, and I asked my dad if this teacher was playing, did she leave the auditorium at any time? And he goes, no, she's been playing the piano the whole entire time. And I can still see that mentally in my head. So I knew I wasn't imagining it. And so that really freaked me out. There's all kinds of other stories. The youth group might have some stories that I've never heard because they're too afraid to tell them. But the most chilling story that I experienced myself, and this was inside the classroom, was in 2004. It was in December. My back was to, we had opened up all the classrooms. We took out all the walls and the doors. So we just had like beams that ran through, and the hallway was widened out a little bit more. So my back was to the hallway, and there was a table, and I was helping a student with her math. And I was standing up and she was sitting down, and we had probably about 25 or so students surrounding us in a square type circle, the way the room was. I had my hair down, so I could see through the strands of my hair that something was, I could see feet. I could see the white pantyhose of this woman. I could see the bottom part of her dress, which was like a light blue sunflower dress, kind of. It had flowers on it or something. And it was over on my left. She was on my left side, and I felt this really weird tingling on the side of my face, like my cheek. And I didn't even get a chance to process that. And then my student, she just literally screamed. And she's kind of a hyper child, she was. And so I told her to calm, because everybody was looking at us. And I said her name, and I said, what's going on? And she just wouldn't calm down. I said, okay, come with me into the office. I'm going to calm down. And it took me a moment to process what I had seen. I told her, before you tell me anything, here, I gave her a piece of paper. I gave her 2 sheets of paper, and I said, I want you to write down what you saw and describe what you saw. And then I wrote down, I think, what I saw. So our descriptions matched perfectly, except for she could see the face and the head and all that. She couldn't really see the legs as much as I could, because I guess me standing up, well, she probably could. Yeah. So anyway, she said that the lady was leaning over by my side. It had long, elongated fingernails. It was either about to scratch my face or slap my face. She had blonde hair, the light flowered sunflower dress, light blue dress, I guess, with yellow sunflowers. Her hair was curled under. It was long. She had short hair, but she had like a long figure. She had white pantyhose, same height as me, black shoes. She had a little nose and weird lips with pink lipstick on them. And I thought, that's a very good description, because I always told my students, always be very descriptive, because that's just how I am. And I thought, well, they might need that later on in life, And when she described it, that reminded me that we never saw the lady leave. So I got to thinking that had to be a ghost or a demon, because I thought maybe it was a parent. And we allowed parents to come in and quietly observe their student at work if they wanted to. We always gave them that option, so they're familiar. Public schools may not do that, but we allowed that. So, and I never heard anybody walk up. I guess she had seen the lady come up to me and do all this. And then I guess that tingling on my side of my face was her about to do that. So I calmed her down. And then the next day or something like that, she was scoring her work, because we allowed them, they were allowed to score they were mandated to score their own work. It teaches them a sense of responsibility and honesty. And trust me, if they cheated, we would find out about it. So she was scoring, and she had a question. And so she asked me this question, and then she went back to scoring, and she looked up and saw that same woman standing next to the teacher's lockers, because our lockers were all open. And she was leaning her left hand on the edge of lockers by the bookcase, and her right hand was on her hip. She still had the same dark blue eyes, and it stared at the student, and she moved her eyes, and then she stopped looking, and then she was gone. And then I went in to get my purse, and, I didn't see her, but I did feel a cold spot. So another time, she said she saw her going into my office, my principal office, and like 10 seconds later, I followed it. But when I followed it, I felt a cold. I didn't see it, but the student saw it. She said, "Did you see the woman in there?" And I said, "No, but I felt a cold spot." That really has freaked me out a lot, because I never had one that I was aware of that was that close to me, but I could feel the tingling on the side of my face. Throughout the years, we have heard all kinds of noises, voices, smells, things disappearing, things reappearing. I've even tried to say a prayer once, and they said my name, and it freaked me out. And I'm like, okay, I'm not strong enough to deal with this right now, because school was stressing me out. And I said, nope, I'll just, go home and wait till the next day to deal with it. But the students would often see shadows. We always had the kids do kitchen duty, so they would always hear noises and their name being called. They would always say, for some reason, that they wanted the student to follow them, like, come here. Like, they'd say their name and say, come here, or come play with me. And I thought that was really strange. But we are dealing with paranormal stuff, so nothing's normal. That's why it's paranormal. In October of 2005, one of the students was waiting for her father to pick her up, and we had heard what sounded like if somebody's in the girls' bathroom, the door being kicked really hard. We tried to reenact it and mimic it, but we could never do it. Jumped up and down, we slammed the door, we shut it gently. None of these produced the sound that we heard, so we were really scared about that too. I think a day or two later, we heard the kick sound again, and I thought, well, maybe it's the weather. But she kept hearing voices. This student kept hearing voices, said her name, come out here. And she just said, I'm not going to go back down there anyway. And then we heard somebody, what I thought, my youngest nephew, I thought I heard him say, help. Went to the kitchen. He didn't say it. So, we just kind of left it at that. Now, the boy that told the story about the 3 minors, I don't know if he was making this story up, but I will go ahead and tell it anyway. Some of the kids were old enough that they could cook their own lunches. And some of them I had to cook because they were too young. So this student, I was cooking all the lunches, and I heard voices or footsteps from the classroom hallway. I just didn't tell anybody because the kids were all still in there. It was time they were by themselves, I think, because I was cooking the lunch. But at lunch, that student had gone into one of the playrooms. We let him play after preschool's over, the nursery area, and he was talking to himself softly. So I go down there, and we heard him say, who said that? I asked him, who are you talking to? And he said, well, someone just said in a deep voice, good. And I'm not sure what he was talking about. But anyway, that was really strange. And he did add another part to the 3 minors. He said one of them had a comb in his hair. So I'm not really sure if that, he was telling me the truth about that part, but that's what he was saying at that point. Things progressed in 2000, from 2005-ish to we had some new students, and around 2006 to 2007, a student said that she heard me, it wasn't me, but she heard what sounded like me sitting in my chair, and the sound of a knife, like somebody sliding a knife across a sharpening rock. She looked behind her, and I was still sitting at her desk. She thought it was right behind her, so we're not sure what that was about either. We do have earthquakes from time to time in our area. It's very rare. I think we're under a fault line. So one time in October of 2006, I was sitting at my desk in the classroom, and everything on the table was vibrating. It was just shaking. and everybody was in their seat and nobody looked up. So I checked and we did not have an earthquake. So I'm not sure what that was about. Nobody was walking around or anything like that. So we just kept hearing voices and during the vibration. And I thought, okay, there's something weird about that. And November of 2006, there was this ghastly smell. It smelled like sulfur, which I know demons are known for that, even though demons cannot go from hell and back and forth to earth. You know, they cannot, once they're there, they're trapped there. Now, my oldest nephew was prone to passing gas a lot, so I asked him if he did, and he said no. And I never I never gave a student in trouble for that, because if they can't help it, they can't help it. So I was just doing it to eliminate where the source of the smell is coming from. And I had smelled the smell all week long by my desk. And so we do have propane and electric at that building, but at this time, I know what propane smells like, and I knew it did not smell like propane. Because when it gets low on propane, you can actually tell that or when it gets filled in, you can always tell. So I always got the chills because I knew that it wasn't propane, and we filled it up pretty regularly. So I started lighting a candle to help get the smell out. And when I blew it out, it stunk up more. So I've decided not to light any more candles during that time. There was all kinds of stuff. One of my other students brought their dog when she came to pick up the kids or something. And the dog was acting crazy. You know, the dog would bark and he would whine, and he would not want to go near the building. This was an outside thing, because we've had things happen outside the building too. And so the mother thought that was really strange, and she knew about the haunting, and she didn't care about it. I mean, she didn't make a big deal about it. We would hear people screaming in the building, and sometimes if I heard something, I would not make a gesture to show the students. They weren't allowed to look behind them, so they always had to stay focused. So at their desk. So if they looked around, then I knew that they heard it too. But sometimes they would tell me later, "Did you hear that?" They'd raise their flag up. They never rose their hand. They would always have a Christian flag or an American flag, and each one had different reasons for, needing attention. And so they would say, "Hey, did you hear that too?" And I'd tell them yes. The one scary part was when my niece, she's the youngest of my sister's kids, she was really scared, and she said, "Aunt Dawn, did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "It sounded like kids screaming." I thought, well, maybe it's the wind, but I looked outside and there was no wind. It was just, the leaves were or the branches weren't moving. She got really freaked out by that, and she was shaking, and I said, "It'll be okay, because I'm not going to let anything happen to you, as long as I can help it." It seemed like the more kids that we had, the more experiences we had. And some of them came to school angry, like they were angry that they had gotten in trouble at public school, and they brought that anger with them, like they don't want to be here. And I don't know if that intensified what was going on, that kind of thing. We would hear all kinds of different voices, from children to men's voices to women's voices, just all kinds of different things. But so I had two brothers along with a sister. So my two brothers decided to put up cameras over the weekend. This was like the scariest thing that we've ever caught. The only problem is we didn't catch it on film, but we caught the audio. They set up the cameras in the classroom, and he had a very high-powered microphone that could pick up all kinds of stuff. And we picked up stuff in the auditorium, like it sounded like an Indian campfire with chanting and dancing and, their stuff. It sounded like an old-time preacher preaching, and my dad he doesn't preach, slams his hand down or anything like that. So this preacher sounded like something from the 1800s. He was yelling at the audience, and it was just really creepy. But the thing we heard was the filing cabinet that was right next to the camera. The drawer was opening and closing it by itself. And a kind of funny note, the brother born just after me and I were watching the video, and he fell asleep. When he heard that, he shot straight up, and I can laugh at it now, but back then he said, "What was that?" And I said, "I don't know." We had to replay it 7 or 8 times. And we got my other brother and my mom over. Mom said, that sounds like a filing cabinet drawer. And I'm like, that makes sense. So I told my brothers, if you had put the camera behind all that, then maybe we would have caught it. So that was, pretty scary. And we did have some paranormal investigators come out from another county, and they took photographs of what they thought was a ghost standing by one of the students' desk area. It's kind of funny. It was all dark. The women and I we heard her screaming in the bathroom because something happened in the bathroom. And what happened was the toilet flushed by itself. And I think I told her that happens sometimes because it's faulty sewer. So I said, that's not spooky. That's just something that happens. So we thought that was funny because it scared her so bad and she was laughing. So I would not have laughed if she wasn't laughing because, I don't do that. One time we heard in 2007 what sounded like my niece crying. And my sister was the preschool teacher at the time. So we go down there and my niece was on the sofa. And my sister questioned her and she said, no, she didn't hear the noise or make it. So she didn't hear it and we did. And the sofa was right next to the water fountain. So we thought that was really kind of creepy too. On the night of January 29th of 2007, I was after 10 o'clock or probably around 10:30. I came over to do some schoolwork and I still had to do some stuff. And I really feel bad that I had to do it at night. So anyway, I heard down the hallway, I heard whispering like somebody was teaching class. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of here. So I hurried up and locked the door and ran on home. Another one, another student came to school in the second week, shortly after we began, and he told my sister he was scared to go in the bathroom because somebody was standing in the corner with eyes watching him go from the corner of the door out the door and followed him to the classroom. And my sister told him it was right there because she was right there with him. Like after he contacted her, he goes, can't you see it? And she said, no, I don't see anything. It's just really, really creepy. My sister has heard a little boy sobbing while she was in the audience with her students. We all heard footsteps coming down the hall, again, because we're always hearing that. We also smelled the sulfuric type smell again. Just had all kinds of stuff. And we had some students that were always causing trouble, so we don't know if that participated in part of that. One time, the scary thing was in November of 2007, we heard what sounded like something really heavy being dragged across the floor. It just lasted for about a minute and a half. Sometimes we'd move the kitchen tables. This is probably in the kitchen area. It's got linoleum, so we moved the kitchen tables and stuff to sweep and mop, and nobody was in there. So we just figured out it was probably a ghost or something. Those are very creepy stories. And there were some months and weeks that we didn't have any experiences or that I didn't write any down because we just didn't hear anything. Or, of course, during the summertime, we wouldn't hear anything because nobody was there. Sometimes I was, but not for the purpose of, I was just doing school, catching up at the end of year stuff or cleaning up or doing something. When I was cleaning up for school one time by myself, I heard the swishing sound by the cabinet door, and I'm not really sure what that was about. So I knew it wasn't windy outside, so I decided, I'm not going to be cleaning up anymore by myself. And so I tried to make it a point to be brave, but bravery only lasts so long. It's really scary being in that building by yourself and not knowing what's going to happen next and I've got a lot more stories to tell for sure. The building right now is vacant because we had water damage and we can't repair it, but I won't go over there after dark, not by myself anyway. My brothers are more brave. I thought, not me, not me. Yeah. So we've also had ghostly stuff in our house, so I can tell that another time. But I've still got pages more to tell of stories from our school. And our school did move to our church building now. And there are some stories there too as well. So when it comes time for that, I will make that transition to tell those and everything. I hope this helps somebody who might have worked in a school and be afraid to say anything, but I'm just not going to say the name of the school so that way I don't, it doesn't get out there.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.